Next is an interview that Randy Orton did not too long ago to Bill Apter. And he said the following about Vince McMahon. And this is something that we are going to totally deep dive on the Stevie Richards Show, more involved, to the point that we may even just cut this out, quite frankly, because there's just too much to talk about. But this is what Randy said to Bill about Vince. Vince McMahon, he had Raw on Monday Night Live. He doesn't care if you had kids. I came to him when I was 35 and my back really started going, and I pleaded with him like, man, I got to not do as many shows, maybe do half the tour and be able to recover. And he just looked at me and was like, oh, I need you on these shows, Randy. Mother Nature gets us all. And to hear that and go, okay, well, I guess there's no other thing I can do than just wear myself out to the nub until I can't walk anymore for this man. And all of the opportunities he gave me, it's nice having him out there, but it's also nice having his son-in-law Triple H running the game. Nick Khan's great. Everybody at TKO that's come in and stepped in, they seem to get it. And it's just a different era. I think the way that they care for the talent nowadays and make sure that talent's good, and if they need a bit of a break, we're only human, they get it most of the time. Now, I did also bring this up to Dutch, and as a product of the Territory days, I said, well, how many of the promoters out there would just wear you down into powder? And he said every single one of them. I was like, did that die out with Vince, do you think, or was it getting easier in the 2000s?
Well, yeah, we talked about this off camera in our pre-production meetings before the debut of this. And what I'm looking at, I'm reading the quote again. I like at the end where it says most of the time, because that leaves it open-ended that they're trying to put their best foot forward to take care of the talent. But as always, it's about making money. And Randy Orton is a draw and needs to be there. So I kind of understand what Vince is saying, but Vince also, it's a bit short-sighted to wear somebody out like Randy Orton, who still works great, looks great, he's literally a legend at this point, and to not take care of a guy like that, where we talked about it before, quality over quantity. Vince is just trying, as you say, the metaphor of wearing him down into dust or powder. I would say it got better. It's always gotten a little bit better each year or era, depending upon who takes it over as we come into the modern era of wrestling. We also talked about, like, you would kind of ask me indirectly if I hold any kind of ill will or bitterness or resentment towards people that get guaranteed contracts now, people that are getting paid, more than living wages, people taking a lot of time off, or they take their time coming back from injuries, concussion protocol. I think all these things are excellent, and they should have been done a long time ago. But of course, how do you balance that? It's not like when Vince told Vince Russo, get a nanny, hire a nanny. That's kind of way more, not insensitive, but in a lot of ways insensitive, where a guy could write from home as he's taking care of his children. That could always be done. In this case with Randy, it's tougher because when Randy Orton shows up at a show that he's advertised on, he physically performs in one way or another. Physically, he has to show up at the show in order for the fans to get their money's worth. So it's kind of a give and take. It's always a game of chicken. It's always a tap dance between the promoter and the talent. Like Dutch said, they're going to wear you out until you're dust or powder. They're going to wear you out until you go out to the field like a horse and get shot, as Bret Hart famously said. Your job is to go out there as a worker, which I think a lot of talents have lost. What Dutch had perfected, and a lot of legends have, is I will work, but I will make it look like I'm working hard and I'm protecting my body at the same time. That's the tap dance that you have to play all the time to not only fool the people in the audience on TV that you're working hard, but fooling the office that you're busting your ass, so they don't think you're just back then being, lazy. And we also talked about chair shots to the head and other things physically that they've improved on. So I would say I'm glad for Randy, because the business needs Randy Orton to be around in it, performing, wrestling younger talent for as long as possible.
I think with Randy, how old's Randy now? He's got to be mid-40s.
At least, yeah.
So he's around mid-40s. In fact, I'm going to live check this as well. Randy Orton is 44. In fact, I thought it was a little older than that.
Well, he started when he was 19, didn't he? In WWE, he started in a ridiculously young age, and I was his first match on Raw, by the way.
Oh, really?
I was the first match with Randy Orton on Raw.
I'm going to get back to that. I'm going to get back to that in a minute. Don't let me forget that. With your tenure in WWF and E, and obviously that stretches from 1999 to 2008, so nearly 10 years. What could you go up to Vince or Jim Ross or John Laurinaitis? And I don't want to open up a can of worms with those three names, but what could you go up to them and they would be sensitive to if you needed a day off or a week off, short of a major injury?
Well, even major injury, back then you didn't want to hide it because the spots were very protected. And when you had something that they were behind, that the machine was pushing, say, right, the sensor, I turned around and said, I was a manager for the most part. So even with my knee injury and I tore my PCL, I was able to still go out, cut a promo, take a bump here and there. But you never did that back then. You just never did it. It's a very there's a lot of sensitive topics when you talk to somebody in talent relations or somebody, if you go above JR and you go to Vince with something that can cause some heat because there is, much like in the military, a chain of command. So if you go to your agent, you have to almost trust that the agent will go to somebody. But then if they don't, you go above the agent, you can it'll make your head spin how much your head's on a swivel, literally, of getting heat or not, just for maybe even standing your ground or maybe even just saying, I really think this would be a better way of doing it. Anything and everything can cause heat, and you'll never know until you're sitting at home or you get squashed on TV and they test you, a lot of that stuff. So the sensitive topics really determined, as we talked about off air, most of the time how Vince wakes up that day. That all rolls down to JR, the agents, the writers, and of course the talent. So you literally are mentally drained just from the choose your own adventure of how going up to somebody in the office will go. And then you just don't do it.
just keep your mouth shut. Just survive.
Like Randy's been in the company 20 or 25 years before he finally, that might have been the first time he ever voiced his concern over his physical status to Vince. Because if that was any earlier, Vince would be like, well, obviously you're not durable enough. I got to get somebody else in there.
I think someone like Randy, though, he's going to get more concessions than most. So maybe he at least can spearhead, or like a John Cena or whoever it is at the absolute top of the mountain. It's almost like I guess like a union. You need the guy at the top to sort of spearhead a union, or else it just isn't going to work. So it's got to be the guys on top to break the cycle of whatever used to be, and then try and get some more time off as well.
It never will happen though, because the top guys at the top are getting taken care of to a degree that if there was a union or anybody that it was distributed evenly or any kind of fairness, and there's much less incentive today. A lot of guaranteed contracts. Back then, there was a lot of incentive. You're talking about house shows, pay-per-views. Now they're PLEs, video games, action figures. I think those four are like huge accumulative money makers, multiple streams of income within your wrestling career. Like literally the video game money bought people houses. It used to be like 20 spots, 24, 25, and nothing else. DLC wasn't a thing. These other types of things. When you got on a pay-per-view for a year, you were making some money. When you got an action figure, when you got a video game, when you're on every house show, when you're booked, it's a great feeling. And then when it's taken away, it's a terrifying feeling.
Yeah.
Because there's no rhyme or reason when you're going to get taken off of these things. And there's really no rhyme or reason a lot of times why you get put on them. So you don't have the formula a lot of times of like, okay, what did I do wrong? What did I do right? And you just kind of got to keep pushing forward.
I want to give one more example, then we'll get back to the Randy Orton story. Sean Waltman in an interview once told the story asking for a day off to go to his trainer Boris Malenko's funeral, and J.J. Dillon told him he was needed on the road. He was in like the opening match. He was in a nothing match. No one would have missed him. It was like night 4. But it's another example of every subsequent talent relations vice president ruling with an iron fist, essentially.
Well, they're not rolling with an iron fist. They are avatars for Vince McMahon. They're basically, just like the writers, just like the agents. These are all buffers and sounding boards to keep you away from the emperor. So, and Vince is super busy. For you to actually have 5 minutes of Vince's time, it means something. You need to make it count. But then again, with Vince too, there was a lot of instances, even in my era, where the last person to get to him before a match or an angle or a finish was what he went with. So you see a line outside his office up until like 5, 6 p.m. before he goes to Gorilla. I had witnessed that personally. But I would also say, with that being said, the Shane Douglas story, going back to Shane, Madison Square Garden, where the doctor did not clear him, where a New York State Athletic Commission doctor to not clear you for a pro wrestling show, you're pretty hurt.
Yeah. I mean, basically, you had to be like breathing and upright.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
How do you feel? Great. Okay, go out there, even though you're sweating and shivering. You got 4 blankets. Yeah, you're good to go. But this doctor, I think, saved Shane from being paralyzed. Thank God. And that was the Vince McMahon, I'm going to go out there and I'm paraphrasing Shane, I'm going to go out there and tell these people that the most important match on the show, which was popcorn after intermission, is going to make them, mad. That's the mental games that Vince would play, that you are the most important match on this house show. Sean Altman, you're the first match. That's the most important match on the show. That gets everybody started. Don't you want to be on the most important? It almost sounds like it's convincing in a way.
Well, I mean, I've heard so many stories where someone will...
But I would dare to say the first match is the most important psychology-wise to get the fans going, but not to miss a funeral.
Yeah. I mean, the second match can be the most important for one. I don't know. I've heard so many stories where someone goes in, airs their grievances to Vince, then 5 minutes later they're agreeing with Vince and nothing's changed. So I don't know where that mind control thing comes from.
That from Jesse Ventura told that story. That was Vince Sr. was so smooth. When you went in to complain about your money, you came out thinking that Vince Sr. was paying you better. That's Vince Sr. Vince Jr. a little bit more nice, but if you say a certain thing that's very innocent, but Vince takes it the wrong way, the switch can flip, and then you're getting TV Mr. McMahon.